You have 3 minutes. Save your all of your answers. You have 2 minutes. Save all of your answers in Connect. Okay, the quiz ended. So I will enable chat. I allowed you to use chat, and also I allowed you to unmute if necessary. Okay, and let's go back to the slides of chapter 11. Okay, good morning, everyone. So, as usual, the quiz feedback will be available after an hour. So you just took the chapter 9 quiz, and we in chapter 9, 10, and 11, we are working on capital budgeting issues. So that means how corporations make investment decisions. So in chapter 9, you learned many capital budgeting methodologies. So in chapter 9, it was important how to apply the capital budgeting tools. So that kind of analytical skills was important. And in chapter 10, in the next chapter, you learned you learned several important issues when applying those tools, especially how to find cash flows, how to calculate cash flows using available information. So first you start with pro forma financial statements, and then you are trained to decide what information is important, how to use the information. For example, understanding the incremental cash flow concept is critical. Also, there are other important issues like how to deal with the sunk cost, opportunity cost, positive side effect, negative side effect, and depreciation, working capital, salvage value. Those kind of details, analytical skills was the main focus of chapter 10. So keep working on chapter, those connect homework problem sets to improve your skills by working on numerical problem sets. So let me emphasize once more to not to miss the due date on connect assignments. So in chapter 11, this is the last chapter of the capital budgeting concept covered in chapter 9, 10, and 11. In chapter 11, we go beyond just applying the capital budgeting tools like NPV. So in chapter 11, you learn this investment decision at a higher level. So you work on scenario analysis and sensitivity analysis to go beyond just one NPV analysis of a proposed project. Remember, so the most important thing you should remember in chapter 11 is we are working on risky projects. So we are talking about future. So nothing is fixed. When we talk about corporations' investment decisions, there are many uncertainties that affect the future of the business and the future of the project. But as in any planning, the corporations do the best based on available information and make decisions. So that's how to run business. So how to manage a corporation, large corporation. But at the same time, when we need to make decisions in an uncertain environment, we need to analyze different scenarios. So we need skills to deal with uncertainty. So that kind of skill we are learning now. So what the key skills you are gonna learn, key skills that corporations use to manage uncertainties. So one tool explained in this slide is a scenario analysis. So remember in chapter 10, when you learned how to estimate cash flows that will be generated from this proposed project, there are many variables. So remember, to calculate cash flow from assets, where do you start? You start from the pro forma income statement, estimated sales, and you subtract the costs, and you calculate EBIT and add back depreciation and subtract the cash. So that's operating cash flow, and you subtract the change in net working capital and subtract and net capital spending. So there are many different variables utilized in that cash flow estimation. So this slide shows what happens to the NPV calculation if we change variables we used to estimate cash flow from assets. So this slide recommends that you need to develop several scenarios. Don't just calculate one NPV and make the accept, reject decision. If that project is a very important one and the stake is high, it's worth developing different scenarios to make sure that the positive NPV project you identified or a negative NPV project you rejected based on one single NPV estimation. That's the high quality analysis. If the stake is high, you need to make sure you apply the right risk management protocol, which is included scenario analysis. So at least for important and important projects, significant impact on the corporation's value, develop at least two additional scenarios, best case and worst case, in addition to the base case you evaluated. And the best case and the worst case may not be have a high probability, but still possible. So be prepared for the worst outcome and be also take advantage of a best case scenario. So that's the idea of this scenario analysis. And you should also understand the differences between scenario analysis and sensitivity analysis. So sensitivity analysis is another tool for managing risk in a capital budgeting decision. So in a scenario analysis, there are many different variables that affecting the NPV of a new project. So it may be very difficult to deal with the uncertainties in many variables. So the sensitivity analysis focuses on one variable. So if you may, if you are familiar with the proposed project, you may be able to identify core variables that have a huge impact on the NPV. So for example, an airline is developing a new destination, and the new project may have oil price as a key variable. So in that case, how sensitive is the airline's new business on the change in oil price? So that kind of analysis is sensitivity analysis, because one variable, oil price, how does it affect the NPV of the new project? But if there are many variables, it's very important. In that case, sensitivity analysis may not be enough. So changing all those variables and make best case, worst case, and base case scenarios. So that's a scenario analysis. So in other words, sensitivity analysis is a subset of scenario analysis where we are looking at the effect of a specific variable and how that specific variable changes the NPV of the proposed project. So if we see, even though the base case scenario gives us a positive NPV, if after the sensitivity analysis, if we see this positive NPV project based on the scenario, base case scenario, but if the oil price changes, this NPV swings very much. So the variability, volatility of and the NPV is is high based on when oil prices change. If that's the case, we may think again. So that's what I mean here. The greater volatility in NPV in relation to a specific variable. So for example, oil price, the larger the forecasting risk associated with that variable. So that means a positive NPV itself may not be a sufficient condition to accept the project. Excuse me. Excuse me. So now you should have a good understanding of the difference between sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis and why do we need them. So we need to try to manage a forecasting risk. So the best way to learn sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis is using a numerical example. So this slide, it presents you this numerical example. So don't look at my solutions provided. Just focus on the information on this slide and think about how are you gonna do the sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis. So let's take a look. So we are looking at a project that has an initial cost of $200,000. And the project has a 5-year life. And there is no salvage. So that means at the end of the 5-year project, so all the initial costs, there will be no remaining sellable, marketable used equipment or anything. So salvage value will not be there. So it's a very simple case. So depreciation is a straight line. And so that means 200,000 initial investment, depreciated straight line for 5 years. So 40,000 will be annual depreciation charge. Okay, and the required return on this project is 12%. Okay, and the tax rate is 21%, and you will be given the base case, lowercase, and uppercase values for sales. Sales, how many units, how many products will be sold. So base, the average number, so lowest number, highest number, because when you usually estimate what's going to happen in the future, we give the most likely number, but that number again, predicted sales, for example, that's just an estimate, so can be high, low. So usually estimates have a range. So the most likely number in the center and optimistic so upper bound and lower bound, usually a forecasted number has a range. So the range will be given for how many units will be sold, so quantity of sales as well as the pricing. So under certain market conditions, the price will be sold at a high price. But if, for example, competition gets severe and the company has some needs to sell it quicker, the company may need to lower the pricing. So the estimated price in the future will also have a range. So price per unit will have a range. So variable costs, so raw material costs, of course, will have a range, and fixed costs also may be variable or may be fixed depending on what project we are talking about. So I provided an Excel file. So if you click the Excel file, you will be able to see that information. So let me just have a quick pause and just make sure you have any questions. So do you have any questions? If you have any questions, you can write on the chat box or unmute and speak. So I don't see or hear any questions. So let me open the Excel spreadsheet. Okay. Okay. There should be an Excel spreadsheet. Oh, hold on. I will click and open. It looks like. All right, so I opened the Excel spreadsheet and I will share. Okay. So when you click the Excel spreadsheet on the PowerPoint slide, you can open this file. So here is the information given. So the core variables are how many products, how many units will be sold. So the company currently estimates that 6,000 units will be sold per year. So that's the base case estimate. But if the economy, for example, the economy recovered quickly from the COVID-19 pandemic, the sales quantity may increase to 6,500. But the pandemic gets worsened, they will not be able to sell as much. So 5,500 is the worst case. These numbers may change, but at the time of this estimate, suppose this was the best estimate the company made. So suppose that's the case. And similarly, how much will be the price? So 80 is the most likely estimate, but can be lower at 75, or highest can become very high. So suppose demand for this new product increases sharply. So for example, home improvement products during this pandemic sells very well. So in that case, price may go up. So price per unit can increase to up to 85. So VC means variable cost. Variable cost, like raw material cost, similarly, on average, 60 is the estimate, but can be lower or higher. So lower bound, upper bound. Fixed cost also can be as low as 45,000, as high as 55,000, but our base case estimate is 50,000. So these are given. So black numbers in this Excel file are given, so you don't have to worry about it. These are information given to you. And the blue numbers, you should be able to calculate them. So what's the goal here? Using this Excel file, what you try to do is doing a scenario analysis. So you are given the best case scenario. You are given estimates for all those input variables. So you are asked to develop base case, best case, and worst case scenario, and calculate the NPVs for those three scenarios. So that's your task. So based on the information given so far, can you calculate those three NPVs? So at the end of this presentation, you should be able to answer yes. Yes, now I'm pretty comfortable with calculating. I can calculate NPVs for those three scenarios. So let's get started. So again, your ultimate goal is to be able to calculate these three NPVs. So for base case, this NPV, and for best case, the best case, this NPV, and the worst case, negative, very low NPV. So these three NPVs, can you calculate using the numbers written in black, using that? So let's start with the easiest case. So the base case analysis. So ignore the range and just focus on calculating the NPV for the base case using just given numbers. So how to calculate sales? So sales revenue is how many units will be sold. So sales revenue, how many units will be sold? So 6,000 units, that's in B2. And what's the price? B3, $80, so $480,000 is the sales. And what's the variable cost? Variable cost should be how many units? 6,000 units, and 60 for the price. So 360,000 will be variable cost, and we subtract fixed cost as well and subtract the depreciation. Again, the depreciation is from 200,000 initial cost and 5 years straight line depreciation, so 40,000 depreciation, and you can calculate EBIT by subtracting variable cost and fixed cost and depreciation from the sales revenue, and calculate tax. How? By multiplying EBIT, operating income, by 21% tax rate. So subtract the taxes, you can get net income. And how to calculate operating cash flow? EBIT plus depreciation minus tax, or here there is no interest payment. We don't have to work. There is no interest payment. It looks like this company is an all equity firm, so no interest payment. So adding back depreciation to that income will get you the operating cash flow. Or if you want, you can just use EBIT plus depreciation minus tax. Either way, you will get the correct answer. So this is per year, and it looks like every year is the same. There is no salvage value or anything. So 5 years, so you use this. And also, so this is operating cash flow, and capital spending at time 0, 200,000, and there is no working capital issue there. So here is the cash flow from asset, and you use the Excel's NPV function and do the calculation. And don't forget NPV, when you use the NPV function, you need to just use year 1 to year 5 cash flow, and initial cash flow should be dealt with separately. So that's how Excel works for the NPV calculation. So this is the base case scenario. So you should be able to do this kind of calculation. And so this is the base case. So any questions about this base case NPV analysis? So there is nothing new. This is everything you learned, listened to so far is based on what you learned in chapter 9.
Oh, Professor?
But any questions? I hear something. So if you have any questions,
yeah, I have a question.
You can unmute and speak. Okay, then I will stop share and I will. So any questions?
Yeah. So for the worst case, for the taxes, couldn't it be 0 because they could carry forward, or do they have to have a negative in the taxes?
Yeah. So yeah, good question. So if there is a so you mean the for loss accounting loss, if firms have a net income which is negative, that will reduce the taxable income from other projects or from the company's existing business. So that should be taken care of. That should be considered as well.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. But Jackie, you're ahead of me. Actually, so far I haven't explained the worst case and the best case. I just wanted to make sure students can calculate base case NPV correctly. But we will get to the best case and worst case scenario soon. But thanks for the participation, Jackie. Any other questions? So if I don't hear any other questions or see other questions, so let's continue with that other scenarios. So after you are able to calculate the base case scenarios, we do, this project that requires $200,000 investment now seems to be generating about 30,000 value overall in terms of present value. So it looks attractive. But again, this is an uncertain project, so we want to see in the best case scenario how good it can become or how bad it is. How bad the outcome can be if the economy gets worse, something like that. In that kind of case, how do we analyze? So in this simple example, so based on the information given, so how do we form the best case scenario? So what do we mean by best case? So this sales number, best case sales number. So sales amount, dollar amount, best case revenue is when the company sell the largest amount and at the highest price. So that's why we are using this 6,500, the largest amount, and multiply by highest price. So that's the best case sales. And how about variable cost? How do we calculate the variable cost for the best case scenario? So lowest cost means it's the best. So lowest cost. So how do we calculate the best case variable cost? So variable cost per unit is the lowest, which is $60. Lowest cost is $58. So $58 cost, variable cost is per unit is the lowest, but we sell the most, the largest amount. So 6,500. So 58 multiplied by 5,500 is the best case scenario for variable cost. Don't use 5,500, the lowest unit sales, because by definition, the best case is for selling the largest amount. So that's the best case. And fixed cost scenario, the lowest amount is 45,000 and depreciation. So you do the calculate how to do the mechanical calculation. You follow the same logic. But this is just a simplified example. But when it depends on what kind of project we are looking at. So in the real world, there may be some kind of a relationship between sales volume and price and variable cost. So if there is a those variables are not moving independently. We need to include that kind of dynamics in the planning as well. So let me stop share briefly and go back to the PowerPoint slides to make sure that I'm explaining so you're understanding what's going on. So in the real world case, do I have a Monte Carlo? Oh, simulation. Yes, here. In the real world, which we are just for convenience, because this is just an introductory finance class, college level. So we are not working on a very complicated real world investment, but in this introductory class, it's enough to understand that the basic framework of decision making. But when you, after you learn this basic framework, in the future, if you need to work on the real project that has hundreds of variables, it may not be enough to work on just a simple, using just a simple Excel file to build all those different scenarios. So in that case, you need to apply a programming language, and that kind of skills like Monte Carlo simulation there is a software package and there are tools that can estimate thousands of possible outcomes based on relationships between those variables. But if you want to learn all those details from the beginning, it's too complicated. So that's why in this chapter, in this course, we just use this simple numerical example. But keep in mind, when you apply this, after you learn this kind of conceptual methodology to evaluate, to deal with uncertainty, there are more advanced tools available in the real world. But right now, in this class, to pass this class, this is enough. So 3 scenarios, how to work with those scenarios to calculate NPV based on given input, simplified input. So that's enough. So what if I ask you to, using these sales, variable cost and fixed cost, and you should be able to calculate EBIT, tax, and net income, and use this net income and all other calculations. You should be able to calculate operating cash flow and cash flow from asset. And look at this. When so this look at the huge difference between the best case scenario and worst case scenario. No, base case scenario. So in the base case scenario, NPV was about $30,000, but in the best case scenario, NPV is over $200,000. So this looks like a very risky project, that there is a variability is very high, and the stake is high, and the potential reward is high. And this will have a large impact on the value of the company, meaning that the stock price will be dependent highly on this kind of volatile project. So if you're able to calculate this best case NPV, move on to the worst case. So before you look at my listen to my explanation, you should be able to calculate NPV on your own for the worst case scenario. So before you look at my numbers, think of how can you calculate worst case sales. So the worst case means the unit sales will be the lowest, and the price will be the lowest as well. So let's move on to that worst case. Yeah, so the worst case, so the price is the lowest and number of units the lowest, and variable cost per unit is the highest, and the sales volume is the lowest, and fixed cost is the highest, but depreciation same amounts. So now we have negative EBIT, and tax will be negative. So that's what Jackie pointed out. So net income is negative. But how come operating cash flow is positive? Because of the tax benefit this will generate because of the loss. So operating cash flow is positive, but definitely not enough to cover the investment needed for this project. So NPV is huge negative. So more than 120,000 will be lost. So that's how to calculate the worst case NPV. So we finished the scenario analysis, the numerical example so far. Any questions? And this Excel file has another explanation on the sensitivity analysis. So when you look at this portion of this Excel file, the very bottom, this Excel file also shows how to do a sensitivity analysis for this numerical example. So remember, what was the difference between a scenario analysis and a sensitivity analysis? So in the scenario sensitivity analysis, we only have one variable changing. Everything else is fixed. So, but there are 4 variables here: unit sales, price per unit, and variable cost and fixed cost. So we can do 4 different scenario analysis for this. But what if? How many units that will be sold? So that's the key variable for this new project. If that's the case, how can we do a sensitivity analysis? So that's what's given there. So now in this sensitivity analysis, we fix everything else, all the remaining 3 variables at the base case number. So base case number. So price per unit and variable cost per unit and fixed cost per unit, all those variables are fixed at the base case level. And we just vary the unit sales. It can, the lowest, the worst outcome will be the lowest sales volume, 5,500, and the best possibility is selling 6,500. So that's those 3 numbers are used, but other 3 variables are fixed at this base case. That's the sensitivity analysis. So keep that in mind and then do this calculation. So sales calculation is based on base case, lowercase, uppercase. The only difference is how many units that will be sold, and other input, price per unit, variable cost, fixed cost, all use the base case number. But sales unit sale sold is different, varying across. So that's why variable cost, it's different, but look at this. Fixed cost is the same. Why? Base, lower, upper has the same, because by definition in the sensitivity analysis for unit sale, fixed cost is fixed at the base level. And similarly, depreciation is also fixed. So EBIT, so based on these, so once you can find out this, you can calculate EBIT accordingly, and taxes and net income you can calculate as well. So let me see. Okay, that's fine, Julia. So yeah, I understand. Sometimes when we have a connection issue using computer, quickly use your phone. So always it's good to have a backup. So I also will remember a few weeks ago, yeah, I had a similar problems. I quickly got back on using my phone. So be ready for an emergency. That's good. Yeah. All right. So this is, so once you can figure out how to find inputs for the sensitivity analysis, lower bound, upper bound, NPV calculation, the rest of the calculation is straightforward. You can calculate EBIT and net income and operating cash flow and use those numbers to calculate cash flow from assets, and you can calculate NPV. So you can see how sensitive NPV to the change in units sold. So how many units can be sold? So it's quite, this project NPV is quite sensitive to the sales amount. Yeah, so this is how to do scenario analysis and sensitivity analysis for using a numerical example. So it's very important to for you to be able to do this kind of calculation. That's why I included practice problems in Connect. So actually, chapter 11 practice problem is quite short. You have just 5 or 6 questions. It's shorter, but each question is a little bit more complicated than before because of the nature of this dealing with uncertainty. So each question, some questions are quite long, so you need to plan ahead to be able to complete before the due date. So don't wait until the last day, so plan ahead. So let me stop here and let me quickly take a screenshot to make sure I give everyone attending the attendance credit. So let me take us first a screenshot, and then yeah, I copied the first page, and I also need to move on to the second page. I take a screenshot, and yeah, I copied the second page as well, and also yeah, I need to copy the chat box just in case I need this information later. So for my record, I copy the chat. And at the end, I will do the same once more. Okay, I saved it. So I'm done with the taking care of the attendance. So if I don't have any questions, I will go back to the slide. So we finished sensitivity analysis and the scenario analysis. Okay, so this is just a summary of the calculations, the scenarios, 3 scenarios we did using the Excel file, and the simulation analysis I just explained. So the simulation, is analysis explained in this slide is just a real world application of sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis. In the real world, of course, we may have a very simple project that can be analyzed easily using an Excel file. So if that's the case, just use the Excel file I gave you and modify it. Can be a 10-year project instead of 5-year project. Or there may be other variables. You may, within the variable cost area, you may add more columns. So variable cost may have different components like raw material cost, like oil price, or some other variables like interest rate move change, or some healthcare rule requirement change. So you may divide each row into different segments. So you may add more variables there to make it more realistic when you need to. But in the real world, if we are looking at a large corporation needs to work on a very complicated project with hundreds of variables, it's still possible. That's where we need the simulation software programming skills. So actually, so if I strongly recommend, I don't know how many of you are currently taking a programming class, but if we are serious about developing a career in finance or accounting, I strongly recommend you to take at least one programming class and become familiar with utilizing computer software to answer the problems. You don't need the computer software skill beyond Excel in this specific class, but down the road, when you take more advanced class, or when you find an opportunity, better job opportunity, you will definitely, having a computer software skill will be very helpful. For example, I don't teach software, I don't use a software skill when I teach classes. Usually, in some classes I use a little bit of programming, but mostly I don't use programming skills in teaching. But for research, for my financial economics research project, I have been using softwares over 20 years. So I used the Fortran first and C long time ago, but I used SAS programming skills for the past 20 years. And recently I added Python to my portfolio of those tools. So I strongly recommend, if you have time during the winter break, for example, there is a very good programming course available, freely available. So for example, I took an online Python class taught by an MIT computer science professor using edX, and I earned a certificate. And it only cost $75 to earn the certificate. So I spent many hours to take that course, but now I'm using that Python programming skill to analyze over 1 million financial statements, US corporations filed to SEC's EDGAR during the past 25 years. So millions, there are millions of financial statements, at least 100 pages long. So that means over 100 million pages of financial statements text. And imagine how long it will take for me to read as a human, to analyze those text data. But now I'm using the Python skills, programming skills, to extract information I need for my research project. And for example, one program I'm using to analyze intangible investments in a company, I started running that Python code Friday last week. And Friday previous week, and it took 5 days, and that analysis ended on Wednesday. Now I'm using that outcome from the 5 days of analysis, and I'm using that to estimate some intangible assets investment of companies made, and I'm analyzing that data using SAS. So this kind of Monte Carlo simulation, so that kind of application is all, sounds like very complicated, but the fundamentals, the logic, the theory, you already learned in NPV analysis and sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis. So learning the theory, the framework, analytical framework, that's what's covered in this class, but how to apply to the real world, the complicated situations, you need to have those skills. Of course, in the real world, when financial managers work on this, solving this kind of problems, they can hire computer scientists to work on those problems. Actually, that's one of, I used a similar approach as well. I hired a computer science graduate student to give as a research assistant, and worked on the project together, and a lot of programming the computer science graduate student did it for me. But I thought, as a manager of that research project, understanding the programming, what's inside of those analysis, Python programming, statistical analysis, that's helpful. So when I communicate with my research assistant, and sometimes I work with computer science professors to analyze finance projects in a company, and in the communication I need, so the analysis, that part is done by computer science professors, but how they do it, if I understand what they are doing, not every detail, but the structure, the more I understand about the structure of their approach and problem solving, I can suggest better ideas to find the best results. So I recommend you the same. So this it's a recommendation, is not for everybody, but if some of you are aiming at developing career in the financial services industry, the programming skill, developing a programming skill will be very powerful when you help us. So in your career development, it will be a very useful addition to your resume. So, all right. So that's it about simulation analysis. So as I emphasized in this slide, simulation is just an expanded sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis. And in Monte Carlo simulation, using more advanced computer science skills, can estimate thousands of possible outcomes based on conditional probability distributions and constraints for each of the variables. So as I mentioned before, in this simple Excel example, we just use the largest sales quantity and highest price. That's the best case scenario, but there may be a conditional relationship among many variables in the real world. So that that kind of a conditional distribution should be taken care of. If that's the case, computer science skills are needed. So the output will be the probability distribution for NPV. So the NPV in our previous example was only 3 numbers, but if we use Monte Carlo scenarios based on thousands of variables, NPV will have a distribution, thousands of different outcomes, and that you will have a probability distribution. So how likely is this extremely high NPV? 2% probability, something like that. So that's like there is a histogram. Will be the Monte Carlo simulation will provide a histogram. But when you apply this kind of complicated methodology, always remember that to get a good outcome, the input should be in good quality. So complicated methodology itself will not help us much if we are using garbage as input. So that's what I emphasized here. The simulation we just mentioned will work only works as well as the information that is entered. So the input variables should be in high quality. Otherwise, no matter how complicated the methodology is, the outcome will be useless. So don't be fooled by fancy methodology. Simple methodology can sometimes provide a pretty good, better result than complicated methodology. So the key is good quality input and thorough evaluation and logically correct, the right logic applied to good quality input, you will get the best analysis. But again, we are talking about uncertain outcomes. So we are almost running out of time. So we will cover break-even analysis in the next class. But before you leave, I just want to point out. So we will spend a lot of time on Wednesday about break-even analysis and operating leverage. But before you leave, let me emphasize once more this. See. Yeah, so we are dealing with making a decision. This is slide. So this is one thing I want to emphasize: beware of paralysis of analysis. So we cannot spend too much time, and so at some point we need to make a decision. So in the real world, so benefits of better analysis output versus cost of doing all those analysis. So Monte Carlo simulation is not free. So we need to weigh the benefits and cost. Complicated analysis benefit versus cost, time and energy. So we do not do that kind of complicated analysis for every project. So, but for a very important project, it may worth investing that kind of time and data and effort. But at some point, we need to stop and make a decision based on what's available. So I will see you next. I see a question in the chat box. Okay. Yeah, okay, thank you everyone. So if you don't have any questions, you can leave. If you have a question, you can stay and start speaking. And I see,